Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Two Sons Podcast. I am your host here, Philip, and in today's episode, we are a little behind. It has been a crazy, I think it's been at least about a week or two since I released the Predator Badlands film. So we're a little behind. Obviously, Thanksgiving and Black Friday are obviously insanely busy at the movies, and we are now getting into the holiday season for both the retail and the movie industry. So I've been working on this lead nonstop. I mean, the time I'm recording this, I just got off a shift. So while I have the time to myself, in this early evening, I wanted to sit down and record another episode for you guys because I just don't know when I'm gonna get the next chance to do so. So I figure, you know what, there's still a couple movies and TV shows that I haven't talked about yet. I haven't really seen any of the new stuff yet. I haven't had a chance to see Zootopia 2. I haven't had a chance to see Wicked for Good, or The Running Man, or really anything else that's out, just because I've been working so much. So, reviews on that will be coming a little bit later. So just, please stay patient. But for now, one movie that I have yet to cover for this year so far that I didn't do anything on is Tron Ares. I did see that a couple weeks ago, and I haven't talked about it yet. So I figured, today is the perfect opportunity to kind of sit down and talk about that. So that is what we are going to be doing today. Like I said, I just been insanely busy. Work. I mean, the only day that I had off for like the last 2 weeks has been Thanksgiving. So I'm extremely exhausted. I'm just waiting, for my next day off. So like I said, I worked an earlier shift today, so I got off relatively early. So I figure while I have the time, I'll sit down and I'll record something for you guys, to at least, get you through the next week. And then I'll try to find some time in between to keep recording and so on and so forth. There's still a ton of shows and stuff that I have to catch up on that I haven't caught up on yet. So that's probably what I'll be doing the rest of the evening after dinner and whatnot. Um, so yeah, but like I said, today we're going to be covering Tron Ares. Should be a relatively short episode for you guys. We're going to go through our usual format and formula, and that's pretty much about it. So let's dive in real quick to Tron Ares. So we're going to see that Tron Ares came out. When did it come out? I was really hoping this would tell me when it was going to come out. No. Okay, cool. Don't you just love when that when that works out? Okay, I guess we'll have to look it up. Tron Ares release date. There you go. So Tron Ares came out all the way back in October. So we're going back, about a good month or so. So it came out on October 10th of obviously 2025. Just taking a look real quick at the cast, we have some, actors and actresses such as Jared Leto playing Ares. We have Greta Lee playing Eve Kim. We have Jeff Bridges returning his role as Kevin Flynn. We have Evan Peters playing Julian Dillinger. We have Jodie Turner-Smith playing Athena, and we have Gillian Anderson playing Elizabeth Dillinger. Those are really, some of the star-studded, kind of like cast and crew. Those are really the characters that we're paying the most attention to in the film. Fun fact, we also had Cameron Mahognan, who's played Cal Kestis in Star Wars, play a guy named Cassis in the film. So that's just kind of cool, just to throw out there real quick. So we see that overall, it's got a, relatively well-rounded cast and crew. I mean, we got some names like in there such as, Jared Leto and Jeff Bridges to kind of raise some eyebrows and whatnot. And sorry, it's been a long day. Just kind of bear with me, guys. So that's the cast and crew. So it came out October 10th of 2025. And I believe it had a PG-13 rating. And obviously Tron Ares is like, I guess what you consider like the third installment in the franchise, like, kind of following, the original Tron movie, which came out, years ago, I think like in the 70s or 80s. And then, it's a direct sequel to Tron Legacy, which came out in 2010. I mean, there have been some references and stuff in the film that kind of relate back to Tron Legacy. But we see that this is the third installment in the Tron franchise. And Tron, unfortunately, when it's come to Disney, has been very put under the radar. The only news about Tron recently, um, before ARES came out, was just them making a ride for Tron at Magic Kingdom in Disney World. But other than that, ever since 2010, it's kind of just quietly flew under the radar. I mean, I don't really know if people were really asking for more Tron. I mean, I know when the movie was announced, everybody was excited. I think they did a relatively good job marketing it. We'll obviously talk about whether or not the film deserved all the marketing and the praise that it got. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was definitely a surprise. I mean, this was not on my bingo card when I looked at movies for 2025. I was excited because, I mean, I remember growing up with, Tron Legacy back in 2010, and I never actually had the privilege of watching the original one. So I would love to go do that sometime and just see, like, how the original one worked out. But I really enjoyed Tron Legacy. I remember really connecting to it when I was a kid, and enjoying it. But unfortunately, it was just one of those things where it just kind of came and gone, and I just totally forgot about it. I mean, I always knew of Tron, but again, I mean, I don't really know how big the fandom is when it comes to Tron. So I wasn't really looking for a third one, unlike other people. I mean, there could have been people that have been waiting for a sequel their whole life. Um, but anyway, so like I said, so this one is a sequel to Tron Legacy. It's going to be the third one in the installment. And now we're going to take a look at some of the ratings. So obviously we're going to look at the big three here. We're going to look at IMDb, we're going to look at Rotten Tomatoes, and we're going to look at Metacritic. So we're going to start with IMDb first. We're going to see that IMDb gave it a 6.5 out of 10. So overall, it's a relatively average score. We see that actually Tron Ares was nominated for one award, I think. It's nominated for a feature film crew of the year from the Directors Guild of Canada. That's pretty cool. But yeah, we see that it's given about a 6.5 out of 10, so relatively average rating. I think based off of what, I saw in the film and stuff like that, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than, some other people, whether it's critics or the audience you're talking to. I think I definitely enjoyed it a little bit more. But yeah, we see IMDb giving it a 6.5 out of 10, which again is, relatively average. We see Metacritic giving it a 48 out of 100. So that's like, I would consider that failing if I'd look at that for a grade. So yeah, so that's definitely lower than IMDb. And we're seeing overall very mixed reviews. I mean, we're looking at the critics. User reviews, we're looking a little bit more favorably. It seems like, if you are looking at the audience seem to enjoy it relatively a lot more. The critics, on the other hand, are very mixed about it. And, most of them are going to be leaning positive, when you break down the percentages. But overall, the majority of the percentages is mixed. So again, obviously not the best start, especially when you're kind of piggybacking off of IMDb. And then now Metacritic is giving it a very similar score. Again, this is kind of turning out to be just a very average film. Now finally, not last but not least, we're going to be looking at Rotten Tomatoes. And this is extremely important because, again, this is going to kind of tie everything in, all together. So we see that the tomato meter for Tron Ares is sitting at a 53%. So obviously that has the rotten meter next to it. It's not certified rotten, but it is a rotten score, right? 53% is not great. Looking at the critic consensus right here, they're saying a sensory feast of vivid neon hues and a hypnotic soundtrack. Tron Ares is gorgeous to behold, but too narratively pragmatic or programmatic to achieve an authentically human dimension. Yeah, I mean that's a very fair assessment. We'll get into the pros and cons in a little bit, but I think that kind of sums it up very, very nice. I mean, it is a very beautifully stunning movie. The CGI, the animation is phenomenal, the soundtrack is phenomenal, but the story and the plot, and the characters are very two-dimensional. And it's a very basic, story. So you're not really capturing the audience in that respect. But it does, I guess for where it lacks in the story and the plot, it does kind of make up for in the soundtrack and the visuals. However, we see that the popcorn meter, so what the audience, perceived this score as, it's at an 85%. So overall, I mean, we see that it's had a relatively largely positive reception from the audience. And we see that, when it comes to the critics, it's been very mixed or poorly reviewed. So this is one of those classic scenarios where when it comes to Tron Ares, the audience enjoyed it more than the critics. And we always tend to look at the audience score because they're the ones that are actually going to watch the film and enjoy it. The critics are doing their job, they're critiquing it, they're looking for specific things. So we see overall, I mean, if you are a fan of Tron and you want to, watch this latest installment of the, franchise, most audiences will agree with you and say that it's worth the watch. We're seeing relatively positive scores. I mean, 85% is about like a B plus. I mean, that's a relatively good score. Especially when those two scores tend to contrast each other so much, that like it's definitely worth watching. Now that we kind of actually, there's one more thing that I wanted to cover. We're going to look to see what the box office made. So we're going to see that the budget for this film was anywhere between 180 to 220 million dollars. According to some latest results, we see that the box office only grossed about 142 million dollars. So if these estimations are correct, we see that this movie did not even make its budget back, which overall, proves that it is a overwhelming failure. Unfortunately. The audience did enjoy it. It had great visuals, it had a great soundtrack. So again, there were definitely things to kind of look back on this film and praise it for. But overall, if you're looking at it from a monetary standpoint and like a logistical standpoint, the film didn't even make its money back. So, in terms of whether this was a success or not, unfortunately it wasn't, and it was a fail. So overall, we're seeing a interesting trends. We're seeing that, this is the third installment in the Tron franchise. We're seeing overall, it's got beautiful visuals, it's got a beautiful soundtrack. We're seeing that the audience has a relatively good and positive reception of it when it goes to see it in the theaters. But we're seeing that it's a film that didn't make its budget back. So in, layman's terms, it lost money. And the critics, are very mixed and are kind of leaning towards a negative direction. So we're seeing a very unbalanced film here, and it really just comes down to who you talk to, whether or not, it's worth going to see this film or not. I mean, at my local theater, it's not playing anymore. I don't know if it's playing anywhere else, to be honest. But I definitely do think that at the end of the day, I think if you are a fan of Tron and you want to see a direct sequel to Legacy, and you want to see where the story looks like it's going, for the future, I would definitely give this, a watch. Now, again, because it didn't really make its budget back, or maybe it just made its budget back, depending on, what financial reports you're looking at, is there hope for the future? It's definitely more up in the air now that I know that it didn't really make its budget back. Because obviously the film does leave off kind of on a cliffhanger. They can go multiple different directions with the story. But based off of the reception and the money that it made and whatever, are we likely to see another one? Probably not, unfortunately. Or if anything, they might make it like a Disney Plus show, and kind of cut the cost like that. But we'll have to wait and see, right? So now let's kind of dive into some of the pros and cons when it comes to the film. So we're going to start with the cons first, so we could always just end off on a good note. So one of the cons that people found is that it has a weak story, which we kind of touched upon this a little bit earlier. So many reviews describe the plot as undercooked, failing to fully explore its themes of AI and technology. This is definitely true. The way they word it is a little unfortunate because I do feel like they show us like I feel like they show us in pretty good detail, like the whole world of AI and technology. I mean, one of the better sequences of the film is when it shows like ARES and like, some of the other, computer AI, infiltrating another company's, files. Like, so to us, it's just like a bunch of people like just typing on a keyboard and doing it that way. But to them, it's like they're literally like invading like a fortress to get these files and information, and they're fighting like I guess like the security or like the I guess like the security that this other company has up like to kind of defend against plagiarism and stuff like that. so I think they actually do a very good job of at least showing it. I mean, when you're talking about like themes of AI and technology, yeah, I think this point is worded very wrong because I feel like they do show us a pretty good understanding of like AI and technology, and they show us a lot in the film. But I won't deny that it is a fairly weak story. You know, I mean, it's not the best. Um, it's very kind of like cut and paste. You know, so I could definitely see why it might be like undercooked or like underwhelming. Another theme we have here is uneven pacing. So the narrative struggles to maintain momentum with slower sections that dilute the excitement. Uh, yeah, you know, again, I mean, this kind of unfortunately piggybacks off of having a weak story. You know, I mean, the pacing is not exactly the greatest. You know, I don't really think, you know, it like jumps all around, to be honest. But, you know, there is, you know, a very short amount of time between probably the second act and the final act where like everything just kind of like goes on its head like right away. So I can understand why there might be some pacing issues when it comes to that. Another point we have here is emotional disconnect. So despite the visuals, the film doesn't deliver the emotional renaissance needed to make audiences care deeply about the characters. Yeah, this is fairly true. You know, I mean, I think Jared Leto did a pretty good job as Ares, but again, he's also an AI, so he did fairly well for the role that he was playing, right? Like, you know, this AI like is not really showing any emotions, like doesn't really have too much of a personality. You know, he starts to kind of build one over time, but when one of your main characters is supposed to be playing an AI, like you're not really gonna have too much emotional depth there. I mean, when it comes to the human characters, I mean, sure, I mean, you know, they could have had opportunities to maybe deepen our connection with some of them, you know, but unfortunately they just didn't really do that. They just kind of like threw us in the middle of this like cold war between these two technological companies, you know, to achieve, you know, the eternal code, you know, or like, I forgot what it was. It was almost like a code that like kind of like made like organic life. So it would sustain like AI or like technological creations for like longer periods of time than what they would usually last for. Because one of the examples they use in the film is making an orange tree in Antarctica and seeing that it survives like days and weeks. So kind of using that technology to help out nature and like our planet and stuff like that. Um, so they kind of just throw us like right into, you know, that whole Cold War, you know, and we're not really given too much of a backstory or a lot of depth with these characters to really make us feel connected with them. So that definitely is a major point for sure. We also have comparison to past sequels. So some critics argue it lands closer to disappointing franchise revivals, like Indiana Jones 4, than successful ones like Star Wars The Force Awakens. Yeah, yeah, I mean, this is definitely true. I mean, especially when you've had like a 15-year hiatus. I mean, people are always going to look at sequels as, okay, is this something that's going to revive the franchise, or is this just, you know, kind of done and dusted? Uh, I mean, Indiana Jones 4 is kind of a bad example because I fairly enjoyed that. I mean, I would consider the most recent Indiana Jones, like the one that I think came out last year, that was like that's a good example of like having a sequel just like disappoint a franchise because like that movie I don't even think was needed, to be honest. um but I do understand the comparison. You know, I assume that Indiana Jones 4 was kind of, you know, met with relatively, you know, unpopular opinion. You know, so when it came to hoping to revive that franchise, it kind of went dormant. I mean, that's kind of why they probably didn't make another one for a couple of years. However, you know, you have more successful sequels like, you know, Star Wars The Force Awakens, which revived Star Wars and rebirthed it and gave it a whole new direction. And it was very successful for, you know, the sequel trilogy as a whole. You know, the sequel trilogy wouldn't be possible without The Force Awakens, regardless of how you feel about it. So yeah, so when it comes to comparing it like that, yeah, Tron Ares, again, unfortunately, because of the reviews, because of the budget, the money making, how it was received by critics and fans, this might have killed the franchise, or this might have definitely paused any sort of future Tron revival for quite a while. Um, Last but not least, we have franchise fatigue. So Disney's repeated attempt to make Tron a mainstream hit still feels forced, with some suggesting the series works better as a vibe than a narrative. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I understand their whole vibe narrative, where just the idea of Tron, just the world building, the characters, the technology, the AI, like, is definitely more of like a vibe or a theme. When you think of Disney, like you have the ride at Magic Kingdom. You have Tron Legacy. Um, I wouldn't necessarily agree that I mean, unless there's been multiple repeated attempts to kind of revive Tron that I just don't know about. I mean, I feel like all they've done is one movie, then Tron Legacy, then I think a possible failed TV show, and then Tron Ares. And those have been relatively spread out, like throughout the 2000s. Um, I think you could point a lot more fingers in other directions when it comes to franchise fatigue. I mean, like, the best one is Moana. I mean, we just got Moana 2 last year, and was it last year or this year? And now they're making a live action one. And it's like, how much Moana are you going to be able to stomach in the next couple of years, when there's plenty of other animated projects that haven't gotten live actions yet. But I do understand their sentiments and where they're coming from. Now we're going to jump to the pros, and we're going to end off here because, again, we've been kind of bashing Tron Ares for most of the episode, so we're going to end on a high note. So some of the pros for Tron Ares have been visual spectacles. So the film delivers eye-catching CGI and futuristic design that continues the franchise's tradition of immersed digital worlds. We kind of touched upon this a little bit earlier. It does a really fantastic job with the CGI animation and its visuals. It really just made it beautifully stunning and just really nice to look at. We also have some solid action sequences, so critics highlight well choreographed fight scenes and dynamic set pieces that keep the energy high. Again, Ares and his comrades, like, infiltrating the other corporations, like files and systems. That was beautifully choreographed. We also see when the AI is, like, coming to the real world, in his battle with Athena. That was also really well done. So again, I think besides being visually spectacular with the CGI, they also did really well with some of their animation and their fight sequences as well. It was very enjoyable to watch. Their motorcycle chase, in the real world, with Ares and Athena, and then Eve, that was really well done as well. We also have a phenomenal soundtrack, which is obviously done by Nine Inch Nails. Is widely praised as one of the film's standout features, adding atmosphere and intensity. It definitely is. I mean, it definitely adds a lot to the movie. I mean, Tron Ares, I think, will always be known for having the soundtrack done by Nine Inch Nails, and it's definitely one of the things that people are going to remember about it. Performances. We also have characters and actors such as Jared Leto, Greta Lee, and Evan Peters bringing charisma to their roles, with some reviewers noting strong individual performances. So again, Jared Leto, Greta Lee, Evan Peters, Jeff Bridges. They all did phenomenal. When it came to their roles, and I think Jeff Bridges and Jared Leto stole a little bit more of the show. I mean, I don't really remember too much about the other characters. I mean, you could argue for what Greta Lee was given for Eve Kim. She did a fairly good job. So I mean, there are some fairly well-rounded performances from this cast and crew that kind of add to again, you kind of take that, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna get some good performances from the cast and crew at the expense of, like, a good story. You know what I mean? So this film is very give and take. Last but not least, we have franchise continuity. So for fans of Tron and Tron Legacy, Ares expands the universe with new characters and concepts. So again, at the end of the day, if this film was a success, it kind of revives the franchise. It's a sequel to Tron Legacy. It brings in, it expands the universe, brings in new characters. It gives a positive and future direction for the franchise. However, again, because of the reception and the box office report, it really just depends on whether or not Disney wants to put more money into Tron, seeing how it was received. I kind of totally forgot that Tron is technically a Disney movie. Um, so obviously they're making a shit ton of money now for Zootopia 2. I think some of their earlier films, during the year, weren't as successful. So it really just depends. I mean, you don't really know what these multi-million dollar companies are going to do and where they're going to put their money, where they're not going to put their money. Um, but we'll all have to wait and see, to be honest, to see if there is a future for Tron. I think at the end of the day, I think I'm sitting pretty comfortably. I think at about like a 7.5 out of 10 when it comes to Tron Ares. I totally agree with it being, visually spectacular. The soundtrack, the CGI, the animation, the fight sequences, I thought were all very good. I thought some performances, by, Jeff Bridges, Jared Leto, I thought they were, pretty enticing, and I enjoyed, their characters for who they were. Um, Obviously, the story was a little lackluster. I didn't think it was the worst, bit of storytelling in the world, but I feel like if you're trying to revive a franchise that hasn't been around for 15 years, you kind of want to come on a little bit more stronger or a little bit more like boom in your face, like this is the story. Um, if you're trying to revive a franchise. So I think they could have done a little bit more with the storytelling. I think the pacing could have definitely used some work, especially towards like the kind of final part of the second act towards the final act. And but yeah, I mean, but other than that, like I said, I think it was a relatively solid film. I'm sitting pretty comfortably at like a 7.5 out of 10. If I had the opportunity to watch it again, I would watch it again. Would I pay money for it? No. But if it happened to go on a streaming service or whatever, like yeah, I would watch it. If it went on Disney Plus, I would watch it. Um, should you go and spend your money on this? If it's still playing in theaters near you and you can go on like a discount day, I would highly recommend just going on a discounted day. I wouldn't pay full price for this film because depending on how big of a fan of Tron you are, it might be a waste of your money. So I'd rather see you save your money and go on a day that's discounted. Or if you have Disney Plus, just wait until it comes out on Disney Plus and then we could all just watch it on there. Um, but other than that, that is going to be it for today's episode, guys. So thank you all for coming back to another wonderful episode of Two Sons Podcast, where we went over the pros and cons of Tron Ares. And yeah, I guess we'll all see where the future of this franchise is going to go from here. So thank you guys for coming out to another episode. If you're wondering where you can find more episodes like this and find out when these episodes are releasing, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Two Sons Podcast. That is with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. You could also follow me on YouTube at Two Sons Podcast. Again, that is with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. That is where all these videos are posted, and then obviously the Instagram and TikTok will post, different TikToks or themed posts around the episodes. Usually I like to try to release them every Monday. Like I said, just turn the notifications on, check those accounts, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. And until I see you guys again, I hope you have a great day, great afternoon, great evening. Please be safe. Don't do anything stupid. Drink plenty of water. Stay hydrated. Stay safe and healthy. Because it's kind of getting like a little colder, so it's getting into flu season. Just enjoy the holidays. Be nice to retail and movie workers, please. We go through a lot of shit, so please be nice to us. Enjoy the time with your family and friends, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Goodbye for now.